The last woman I dated told me I was like a waiting room. Comfortable, she said. Climate controlled. A nice enough place to sit until the thing you actually came for was ready. She meant it as a breakup, and it worked, because I've never been able to shake it. I'm Eli Caron, I'm 32, and I've been a licensed electrician in Dartmouth for almost 9 years. I own half a duplex on a dead-end street called Birch Cove Lane. The unglamorous half, the one with the older windows and the porch that needs a coat of paint every spring and never gets one. After she left, I leaned all the way into being a waiting room. I took the steady jobs, the rewiring and the panel upgrades, the calls nobody else wanted on a Sunday. I came home smelling like wire casing and burnt dust, fixed whatever the house threw at me, and tried very hard not to want anything I couldn't already hold in my 2 hands. Then the other half of the duplex sold, and Nora Halloran moved in. She was 34, a nurse on the pediatric floor at the IWK over in Halifax, the kind of job where you don't talk about your day much, because most of the stories don't have endings you'd want to repeat over a fence. Her side of the duplex got the better light. She painted the front door a deep green within the first week and lined the steps with planters. Mostly herbs she said she'd kill by August. Mostly herbs that were still going strong in October. There was a string of little tin bells she hung by her door, and when the wind came off the harbor they made this thin, rattly sound, like something tired trying to stay polite. We started the way neighbors do here. She knocked one Saturday to ask which bin the city took on which week, because the schedule changes after a holiday Monday, and nobody can ever keep it straight. I told her, and then I told her she'd written it down wrong, and then I just took her recycling out to the curb myself for a month until she got the rhythm of it. When the first real snow came in December, I was out at 6 in the morning doing my driveway. And I did hers too, because she was on a night shift and her little Honda was buried to the mirrors. She caught me at it the next storm and tried to take the shovel. I wouldn't let her. We fought over a shovel in the dark in our pajamas like 2 idiots, and that was probably the moment something shifted, though I'd have denied it if you'd asked. Little things stacked up the way little things do. She brought over a foil tray of butter tarts she'd made too many of for a staff potluck, and I ate 4 standing at my counter before I'd even taken my boots off. I rewired her dimmer switch when the dining room light started buzzing, and I didn't charge her, and she got mad about not paying me, and I told her she could pay me in butter tarts, and she said that was a dangerous contract to sign. Some nights I'd come home after a long call, still in my work jacket, and she'd be out on her steps with a mug of tea going cold in her hands, just staring at the streetlight like it owed her money. I never asked her what was wrong. I'd just lean on the railing on my side and tell her something stupid from the job. The guy who tried to fix his own panel with a butter knife and a YouTube video, the basement that had been wired by what could only have been a raccoon with a grudge, until she laughed. Her laugh was quiet and a little surprised, like she kept forgetting she still had one. I told myself, more than once, not to get attached to the sound of it. Nora remembered things. She remembered I take my coffee black and bitter, no sugar, the way you do when you started drinking it on overnight shifts and never bothered to grow out of it. She remembered I forget to bring the bins back in. She remembered somehow that I can't stand cilantro, even though I'd swear on my license I never told her. She made the duplex feel less like 2 strangers stacked side by side and more like one house that just happened to have a wall down the middle. It was a Friday, in early March, when she came across the little patch of frozen grass between our front walks, holding a covered casserole dish in oven mitts, snow melting on her shoulders. She had her hair tied back like she'd done it in a hurry, and her eyes had that tired set to them I'd learned to read. "Eli," she said, stopping at the bottom of my steps. "You busy tonight?" I'd been on the porch coiling extension cords, which is a thing I do when I don't want to go inside. Depends. If you don't count a frozen pizza and the Habs losing to somebody they shouldn't, then no. She smiled, but it didn't get up to her eyes. "Good, come over for supper." I'd been inside her place before. Tea when I had a cold she insisted I had caught from her, leftover lasagna once, a beer on her back step in the summer. But supper, the way she said it, landed heavier than any of those. "Special occasion?" I asked. She looked off toward the street. "Not really. I just made too much and I could use the company." That last part got me, because Nora Halloran did not ask for company. She was the one who showed up with soup. She was the one who fixed your week and disappeared back behind her green door before you could thank her. So I said, "Yeah, okay. What time?" 7. She paused. "And wear something decent." I looked down at my hoodie, decent by Neighbour standards, or decent by meeting the parent standards. I should have asked the obvious question right then. I should have said, whose parents? But I'd learned not to push her when she had that look, the one where she was already halfway out of the conversation. So I just said okay. And I went inside. And I ironed a shirt I hadn't worn since my cousin's wedding. At 7, knocked on her green door in a gray button-down and dark jeans, clean-shaven, feeling like a man going to a job interview he hadn't applied for. The second she opened it, the smell hit me, roast chicken and garlic and something sweet from the oven, and she was wearing a deep green dress the same color as the door, and for a second I genuinely forgot how to operate my own face. "You came," she said. "You asked? Should I have brought something? Wine?" "You brought yourself." "That's plenty." The way she said it made my chest do something I'd been telling it not to do for months. Then I heard the voices behind her. More than one. A lot more than one. She reached out and took my hand. I looked down at it, then at her. "Nora?" "Just follow my lead for a minute," she said, very quietly. "Please." "For?" I could ask what on earth that meant. She pulled me down the short hall and into her dining room, and there were 5 people sitting around a table that was set with the good plates, the ones that only come out for an occasion. Her mother stood up first, a trim woman with a silver bob and sharp eyes, the kind of sharp that comes from years of being disappointed politely. Her father stayed seated at the head of the table and watched me the way you watch a soffit you're not sure is going to hold. A younger woman, clearly the sister, grinned like she'd been let in on a secret. A man I took for the brother-in-law gave me a friendly enough nod, and leaning against the sideboard with a glass of red in his hand was a tall guy in a half-zip sweater that probably cost a furnace, looking at Nora the way some people look at a house they used to own and still think they have a key to. Nora's fingers tightened around mine until it nearly hurt. "Nora, sweetheart," her mother said, warm but careful. "You're home, and this is—" Nora took a breath. I felt it more than heard it. Then she said, clear and steady, "Mom, Dad, this is Eli, my boyfriend." The room went silent, in a way you could feel on your skin. I stood there with my hand locked in hers and my brain 3 full sentences behind. 10 minutes ago, I was the guy next door who shoveled her driveway and fixed her dimmer switch. Now I was, apparently, the man she'd been quietly in love with for a year and had somehow forgotten to mention to anyone, including me. Her mother's eyebrows went up. Her father set his fork down with a small, deliberate click. The man by the sideboard, Grant, I'd learned his name was Grant, smiled like someone who'd just been handed an extra ticket to a show he'd already paid to see. And Nora kept holding on, like my hand was the only thing in that room bolted to the floor. I had been tricked into coming to supper. In under 30 seconds, I'd gone from the neighbor with the spare shovel to the love of her life. And the thing that rattled me most wasn't the lie. It was that some stubborn part of me didn't want to let go of her hand. Her mother recovered first. "Boyfriend," she repeated, turning the word over like she was checking it for chips. Her father, a big, quiet man with a carpenter's hands, didn't say anything. He just looked at me the way you'd size up a load-bearing wall, deciding whether it could take the weight or whether it was about to come down on everybody. The man by the sideboard took a slow sip of his wine. "Interesting," he said. His voice was smooth and unhurried, a voice that had won a lot of arguments by simply waiting them out. Nora never mentioned she was seeing anyone. Her hand had gone cold in mine. "Grant," she said flat, "not everything in my life has to be run past you." So that was Grant. I'd caught the name a couple of times over the fence, always followed by Nora going quiet for the rest of the night. A lawyer. Corporate, downtown, the firm with its name on the side of a tower. The kind of man her parents had probably already mentally filed under the one that got away. He had the whole package. The easy confidence, the smile that made you want to agree with him just to keep him smiling at you. I've crawled through attics full of knob and tube that should have burned the house down years ago. I've stood in a flooded basement with a live panel 6 inches from the waterline and kept my hand steady. But standing in that dining room, pretending to be a man's boyfriend while the actual ex-boyfriend studied me like a stain on the carpet, that one wasn't in any apprenticeship I'd done. I could have ended it. I could have let go of her hand and said there'd been a misunderstanding, and walked back across the frozen grass to my frozen pizza and let her clean up her own mess. I had every right to. Then her thumb moved, just barely, across the back of my hand. Not a command. A please. I smiled at her mother and put my hand out. "Eli Caron, it's good to finally meet you both." Her mother looked at me a beat longer than was comfortable. Then the polite smile came back. Well, she said, I suppose supper just got more interesting. Nora let out a breath so small I almost missed it. We sat down side by side. Under the table, her knee found mine and pressed hard, and when she started to pull it away, I didn't move, because I figured she needed something solid more than she needed her dignity intact. The questions started right away, wrapped up in good manners and cloth napkins. So, Eli, her mother, cutting her chicken into precise little squares. What is it you do? I'm an electrician. I run my own small outfit out of Dartmouth. Mostly residential, some commercial. A little silence settled. Grant swirled his glass. Ah, he said, an electrician. He managed to say it the way you'd say garbage man, like it was sweet that I had a job at all. Nora set her fork down a touch too hard. Eli's very good at what he does. Half the houses on our street would have burned down by now if he wasn't around to tell people to stop putting space heaters on extension cords. I turned to look at her. She'd said it like she meant it, not like a line in a play. Her father leaned back. And how long have you two been together? Nora hesitated half a second. I got there first. About a year, since she moved in next door. Neighbors, the sister said, brightening. Oh, that's adorable, the classic boy next door. Nora's cheeks went pink. I shrugged. At first, I was just the guy who took out her recycling and shoveled her driveway. Then she started paying me in butter tarts. I'm a man of principle, but I'm not made of stone. The sister laughed out loud. Even her father's mouth twitched. Nora kicked me lightly under the table, and for a second, the air in the room loosened. Grant wasn't done. So how did this little neighborhood romance actually start? He asked, smiling like he was doing us a favor by being interested. It seems quick. Nora went still next to me. I set my glass down and looked at him. It wasn't quick at all, I said. The whole table turned toward me. And I looked at Nora, and somewhere in that second I genuinely lost track of whether I was still covering for her or finally saying things I'd been carrying around since the first snow. It started small, I said, quieter now. A frozen driveway. A tray of butter tarts on my step because she'd made too many. One night she left a bowl of soup outside my door with a note because she knew I'd just come off a 14-hour call and wouldn't want to talk to anybody. After a while, I noticed the first thing I did when I pulled in at night wasn't unlock my own door. It was check whether her porch light was on. Nora had stopped breathing beside me. I kept going, lower. I started missing the sound of those little bells she's got by her door. I started missing the way she pretends she isn't exhausted when she obviously is. I caught myself looking forward to the dumb things, her out there talking to her plants like they're patients who won't follow doctor's orders. The sister put her hand over her mouth. Her mother's face had softened at the edges. Grant had stopped smiling, and Nora was looking at me like I'd handed her something she hadn't asked for and didn't know where to put. Then, without any warning, she reached over, took my hand again, and set it on top of the table where everyone could see it. You left out the best part, she said. I looked at her. What part? She wasn't looking at her family anymore. She was looking right at me. The part where I liked him first. My heart tripped over itself. That didn't sound like a line either. Because he's kind without needing anyone to clap for it, she said. Because he helps you and then acts like it was nothing, like the snow shoveled itself. Because when I've had the kind of day at the hospital that I can't talk about, he doesn't ask me 20 questions or hand me a bunch of useless advice. He just leans on his side of the railing and tells me a ridiculous story about a raccoon-wired basement until I can breathe again. The table had gone dead quiet. I looked at her with my throat closing up, and somewhere in there I started to wonder if the person who'd really been fooled all night wasn't her parents. It was me. I volunteered to carry the plates to the kitchen after the main course, which was a lie too, because what I actually needed was air. The kitchen was warm and smelled like garlic and lemon. I set the stack in the sink and braced both hands on the counter and tried to get my head to slow down. The door swung shut behind me. Nora. She stood with her arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. I'm sorry, she said. I turned around. She wouldn't look at me. I didn't plan to say you were my boyfriend. Not like that. So you planned to say something. She closed her eyes. I was going to say you were someone I'd been seeing. Keep it vague. But I walked in and Grant was sitting there, and my mother was looking at me like I'd failed some test I didn't know I was writing, and I panicked. And your hand was right there. She stopped. I'm sorry. The strange thing was, I wasn't angry. I kept waiting to be. She'd dragged me into a lie, marched me past her whole family and her ex like I was a shield she'd grabbed off the wall on her way out the door. I should have been furious. Instead, all I felt was something heavier, something that hurt in a completely different spot. "Grant's the reason you needed me here tonight," I said. She nodded. "My mother still thinks he's the right choice. Successful, good family, says all the right things at the right times. To them, he's the safe one." She let out a breath. They don't know what it actually felt like. What did it feel like? She looked at the floor, small, like an inconvenience. He never raised his voice, never put a hand on me. He just had this way of making me believe that if I was upset, I was being intense, and if I was tired, I wasn't trying hard enough, and if I wanted him to actually hear me, I was asking for too much. Her voice caught. By the end, I was apologizing for things I hadn't done. I was apologizing for being a person. I took a step closer, but left enough room that she wouldn't feel cornered. "Nora." "None of them know," she whispered. "Because, in front of them, he's perfect. And I'm just the 34-year-old who's still single, still in a duplex, still hasn't done a single thing with my life that fits on a Christmas card." I thought about all those nights she'd been out on her step with cold tea, eyes red, telling me she was fine. I thought about how easily I'd let myself believe her. "What you said out there," I asked slowly, "how much of it was real?" She lifted her head. And the question hung there between the sink and the door. She could have said none of it. She could have laughed it off and walked us both back to the safe line. Just neighbors. She didn't. "More of it than I want to admit," she said. My chest went tight. "Since when?" She gave a small, worn-out laugh that sounded like it cost her something. "Maybe since the morning we fought over the shovel. Maybe the night you left soup on my step with a note that said you didn't need to come in, you just figured I wouldn't want anyone seeing me look that rough. Maybe every single time you stood on your side of the railing, pretending you just happened to come outside." I couldn't get a word out. "I tried not to," she said, taking one small step toward me. "Because you live 4 feet away. Because if it went sideways, I'd have to look at your half of the house every morning for the rest of my life. Because I'd just gotten myself out of needing somebody, and I was terrified of needing the wrong person again." She smiled, but it shook. "And tonight I was selfish. I pulled you into the middle of my family. I used you to hide from Grant." "No," I said. She stopped. "You asked me to be a shield," I said. "But what I said out there wasn't an act either." Her eyes filled. "Ely, I don't know exactly when it started." My own voice had dropped. "Maybe when I caught myself doing a nicer job patching your back fence than I'd ever done on mine. Maybe when I started keeping the coffee you like in my cupboard even though you only come over every couple of weeks. Maybe it was every night I heard your car pull in after a shift and felt something in my chest let go because it meant you were home and you were all right." I looked down at her hand. I told myself it was just being a good neighbor. I'm not sure I can keep lying to myself about it. The kitchen had gone very still. The space between us had shrunk to almost nothing. She glanced at my mouth, quick but long enough that I noticed. I lifted my hand slowly, giving her every chance to step back. She didn't. My fingers brushed her cheek, and the door swung open. The sister stood there with an empty glass, eyes bright with absolute delight. "Oh," she said, "sorry. I came in for the corkscrew, but it looks like you two are busy staring at each other like the back half of a Hallmark movie." She didn't sound remotely sorry. "For the record, I'm on your side. Ely is a serious upgrade. Grant has the energy of a man who'd correct the waiter's grammar." I almost laughed. Nora covered her face. The sister started backing out, then paused. "Oh, and Grant just brought up Calgary." Nora went pale, and just like that I understood that the night was nowhere near over. When we came back to the table, the air had changed again. Grant was leaning back like a man holding a winning hand. Her mother had that worried, hovering look mothers get when they think their kid is about to do something they'll regret. Her father was quiet, but some of the hardness had gone out of his eyes. I sat down beside Nora and set my hand on the table, close enough that she could reach it if she needed to. She did. Grant spoke first, voice smooth and almost gentle, which I was already learning was his most dangerous setting. "I was just surprised, that's all. If you two are serious, Ely, I think you ought to know. Nora was offered a leadership position out in Calgary last spring. Clinical educator. Big new children's wing, real money, the kind of role that makes a career." He let that sit. She turned it down. Wouldn't even fly out for the second interview. Her mother sighed. "It was a wonderful opportunity. I still don't understand why she let it go. We just want what's best for you, Nora, her father added quietly. Nora's hand trembled a little in mine. I always assumed she was afraid of change. Grant went on, easy as anything. She likes things familiar. Same hospital, same street, same. He looked at me when he said it, neighbors. I held his eyes and didn't blink. Nora took a slow breath. I'm not afraid of change. Then why? Grant tilted his head, patient like he had all night. Her mother leaned in. Nora, Grant's only trying to help. We all are. Nora set her napkin down. No, she said. You all want a version of me that's easier to manage. The table went silent. Her voice stayed steady, but I could hear all the years stacked up underneath it. Calgary was a good job. I didn't want it. I didn't want to leave the kids on my floor that I've been looking after for 3 years. I didn't want to walk away from a team I'd finally learned to trust. I didn't want to move 2 provinces away, just so it sounded impressive when Mom told the bridge club. She turned to Grant. And I didn't turn it down because I'm scared of change. I turned it down because you'd already taken a job in Calgary, and I knew if I went, I'd end up right back in your orbit, listening to you tell me what was good for me. Who was good for me? How to live so I'd look like less of an embarrassment. Grant set his glass down very carefully. Nora, you're being dramatic. She looked straight at him. That's the word. That's always the word. When I tell the truth, I'm dramatic. When I'm hurting, I'm too sensitive. When I don't want to follow your plan, I'm being immature. Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. It took me a long time to figure out that love isn't supposed to make you spend the whole relationship apologizing for who you are. The sister had gone very still. Her father's face had changed completely. Her mother's hand had come up to her mouth. I didn't say a word. This wasn't my fight. She didn't need me to win it for her. She just needed to know she wasn't standing in that room alone. And then she reached for my hand again, not for show this time, just to hold herself up. I stayed because I want this life, she said. This street, this job. Quiet mornings, the dumb little fence between 2 yards. Somebody who doesn't make me feel like I'm hard to love. I turned to look at her. She wasn't looking at me, but her fingers were gripping mine like a railing on an icy step. Grant stood up. I think I should go. Nobody stopped him. On his way out, he looked at me one last time. Good luck. She's more complicated than she looks. I know, I said. It's one of the better things about her. He paused for half a second, then he left. After the front door clicked shut, the room sat heavy. Her mother spoke first. Nora, I didn't know you felt that way. Nora gave a small, tired smile. Because every time I tried to tell you, somebody said Grant was just being caring. Her father let out a long breath. I'm sorry. Just those 2 words. But Nora froze like she'd waited her whole life to hear them and had stopped expecting to. The rest of supper was quiet, no more interrogation. Dessert eaten too fast, apologies that came out sideways and years too late. When we finally stepped outside, it had started to snow, the soft kind that falls straight down with no wind behind it. Her mother hugged her longer than usual, then looked at me. Thank you for being there for her tonight. Nora said, fast, Mom, I don't need someone to take care of me like I'm a kid. Her mother nodded, eyes wet. I know. But if somebody makes your life a little easier to breathe in, I'd rather learn to be grateful than be the reason you stop telling me things. Nora didn't answer, but I saw her eyes shine. We walked the little path between our 2 front doors. The snow caught in her hair and didn't melt. Her porch light was on. So was mine. The tin bells made their thin, tired sound. Halfway between the 2 steps, she stopped. I'm sorry about tonight. You already apologized. Not enough. How long are you planning on apologizing for? She looked up at me, voice gone small. Until you stop looking at me like everything's different now. I stepped closer. But everything is different. She swallowed. For the worse. I looked at her green door, then at my chipped one. 2 halves of 1 house, 1 stupid little fence. A year of things neither of us had said out loud. No, I said. Just that I don't know how I'm supposed to pretend tomorrow morning when you're out salting your steps 4 feet away from me. She laughed, soft, eyes still wet. Then don't pretend. I reached out and touched her cheek, and she leaned into my hand without a second of hesitation, and I kissed her. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't desperate, it was slow and careful and a little unsteady, 2 people who'd stood on opposite sides of 1 fence for a full year finally finding the gate. When we pulled apart, she rested her forehead against my chest. Tomorrow's going to be so weird, she said. Yeah, we're still neighbors. Yeah, What if it breaks? I look down at her. Then we go slow. We don't turn one ridiculous night into a promise neither of us can keep, but we also don't pretend that didn't just happen. She was quiet a moment, then she nodded. Tomorrow, a real one, a date. No parents, I said. No Grant, no ambush supper. No lying. No lying. The next morning she was at the fence in an oversized cardigan with a toque jammed on her head, holding a snow brush instead of a watering can because that's March in Nova Scotia. She looked like herself again. Not the woman in the green dress, just my neighbor. Morning, she said. Morning, fake girlfriend. She raised an eyebrow. Fake? I took a sip of my coffee. We'll reassess after the actual date. She laughed and chucked a handful of snow over the fence at me. And it caught me right in the collar, and it was the best morning I'd had in 2 years. Our first real date was nothing fancy. I took her to the Saturday market down by the harbor. Fresh bread, decent coffee, a guy playing fiddle slightly out of tune by the door, the whole place smelling of wood smoke and frying donair. She bought me a keychain shaped like a little hard hat because, she said, somebody needed to remind me I don't have to do every hard thing alone. I bought her a tiny pot of lavender from a stall, and she pointed out, reasonably, that she already had a whole step full of lavender. This one's from my side of the yard, I said. She looked at me. Why does that matter? So, even on the nights you don't come over, you've still got something of mine in your house. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she kissed me right there between the honey stand and the bread, with no audience and no reason except that she felt like it. After that we kept our promise. We took it slow. We still lived in our separate halves. We still met at the fence most mornings. She still turned up with soup after my long calls, and I still found reasons to fix things on her side that didn't really need fixing. But now, when she fell asleep on my couch after a brutal shift, I didn't sit there rigid and afraid of wanting too much. I'd pull a blanket over her, kiss her forehead, and listen to her mumble, half asleep, stay a bit, and I'd stay. A month later, she invited me back to her parents for supper, and this time, she told them ahead of time. No surprises, she said. No Grant. Her father didn't grill me about 5-year plans. He asked about my work, then mentioned, very casually, that his garage had a panel from about 1978 that he was fairly sure was haunted, and wondered if I'd have a look sometime. Her mother didn't interrogate me either. The sister raised her glass and toasted the couple who lied about how they met and somehow turned out to be telling the truth. And Nora went red, and I laughed so hard I nearly choked. After supper, her mother pulled her into the kitchen for a quiet talk, and I ended up in the snowy backyard with her father, who handed me a snow shovel without much explanation. This a disguised interrogation, I asked. He almost smiled. You talk more than I figured. I talk when I'm nervous. We cleared the back walk in silence for a while. Then he said, not looking at me, she stands up straighter when you're around. Did for years before this fella, didn't for the whole time she was with him. Started again about a year ago. I clocked it, didn't know what it was. He paused. Now I do. I looked through the kitchen window. Nora was standing at the sink with her mother and sister, a tea towel over her shoulder, head tipped back laughing at something. The warm light fell right across her. She does the same thing to me, I said. He nodded. Then don't lose it. I won't just try, I said. I'll learn. We've both been put through it. Kind people don't show up knowing how to love somebody. You've got to learn it. He didn't say anything else, but he clapped a hand on my shoulder hard enough to nearly buckle my knees, and we went back inside. Winter let go, the way it does here, all at once and far too late. The fence between our yards slowly stopped being a fence and started being the place we met every morning with 2 coffees. She planted lavender on my side of the line. I rebuilt her rotting front steps. She left a mug with her name on it in my cupboard, and I left a jacket at her place because she never, ever dressed warmly enough for an Atlantic spring. Some evenings we didn't talk much at all. We just sat on our 2 separate steps with our hands meeting over the fence, listening to the bells and the far-off sound of traffic on the bridge, and the quiet didn't feel lonely anymore. There was somebody in it. A year after the night she introduced me as her boyfriend before I'd agreed to be one, she set up a small supper in her backyard. No family, no exes, just the 2 of us, 2 plates of pasta, a cheap bottle of wine, and a string of patio lights she'd made me hang along the top of the fence. That's when I noticed the gate between our yards had been painted, a soft, familiar green, and there was a little wooden sign hanging on it. Path to his place, it said, with an arrow pointing at my door. I looked at her. Real boyfriend or fake? She stood under the lights with the wind moving her hair. Do you still need to do an assessment? I stepped forward and pulled her in. I might need more evidence. She put her hand flat on my chest. I love you, Eli. It was the first time she'd said it. Not in a panic, not in front of her parents, not as a weapon aimed at someone across a table. Just her, in her own backyard, telling the man next door that out of everyone, she'd picked him. I kissed her. I love you too, Nora. She smiled against my mouth. Good, because I already told my mother that next year you might not be the guy next door anymore. I went very still. Nora. She laughed. The real one. The quiet, surprised one I'd fallen for over a fence a full year before. And for the first time since that ambush of a supper, I didn't feel like I'd been tricked into anything at all. I felt like I'd finally walked through the gate I'd been standing next to the whole time. I've gone back to that dining room more times than I can count, to the half-second where I could have let go of Nora's hand and walked out into the snow and let her clean up her own lie. I came close. What stopped me wasn't some big noble idea about myself. It was a smaller, stubborner thing, that you don't leave a person standing alone in the worst minute of their week, just because the mess technically belongs to them and not to you. I think that's the part people get wrong about being decent. They imagine it's loud. Most of the time, it's just deciding not to drop somebody's hand. But staying wasn't enough on its own, and I want to be honest about that. If I'd only been kind and not paying attention, I'd have walked out of that house thinking Grant was a smug guy in an expensive sweater and nothing more. It took actually listening. To the flatness in Nora's voice when she said his name, to the way she got quiet for a whole evening afterward. To understand what he'd done to her wasn't loud either. He never raised his voice. He just taught her to apologize for being a person. Learning to see that, to tell the difference between a man who's caring and a man who's managing you, is its own kind of work. Nobody handed me that. I had to earn it the slow way, mostly by getting it wrong first, 2 years earlier, with someone who told me I was a waiting room. And then there was the hardest part, which was choosing to want something again, after I'd built an entire quiet little life out of wanting nothing. Anyone who's been told they're too safe, too ordinary, too easy to set down, knows the temptation to just stay behind your own fence forever. It feels like wisdom. It's actually just fear with good posture. The bravest thing I did that whole year wasn't running into anything on fire, standing on the steps in the snow and admitting out loud that I'd been checking for her porch light every single night, knowing she could say it back wrong and I'd still have to look at her half of the house every morning. So that's what I'd leave anybody with. Be the kind of person who doesn't let go of the hand. But also keep your eyes open enough to know who's actually safe and who only looks it from across a dinner table. Those two things are not the same, and the people who learn it the hard way pay for the lesson. And when it's your turn to risk something, don't mistake a locked gate for peace. Nora painted ours green and hung a little sign on it. And I think about that sign more than I expected to. The fence was never the problem. The fence was just where we kept meeting until one of us was brave enough to open it.